You know, sometimes the quietest corners of the internet, they kind of feel like archaeology sites. They're places where you can unearth these stories that we all thought were lost forever. So today, we're going to grab our virtual shovels because we're digging one of those stories up. Let's get into it.
So our story kicks off, like so many do these days, not with some dusty old book in an archive, but with a simple question, just typed out and posted online.
2 years ago, on the ska subreddit, a user posted this digital message in a bottle. They'd just stumbled upon a band called the Busdrivers, a group that had, for all intents and purposes, completely vanished nearly 2 decades ago.
And what happened next? Well, it was pretty amazing. This one little question, it's like it just uncorked this flood of memories, fragmented, personal, superhuman memories, from people who were actually there, in the crowd all those years ago. And a picture of this band, it just started to form, piece by tiny piece.
All right, so boom, the first clue drops, a location. The band gets pinned to the map in Gainesville, Florida, and that place, Gainesville, turns out to be a huge piece of this puzzle.
Then we get a description of their music, not just ska, but something more, a surf bounce. I love that. You can almost hear it just from that little description, right?
Okay, and this is where it gets just so human and specific. These are the quirky little details that really stick with you. It's not just a band. It's a bunch of people. Think about that. You're in Florida, surrounded by water, and your trumpet player is terrified of sharks. That's the kind of stuff you remember.
And this shows you, right? This wasn't just some band people put on a playlist. They were a part of someone's actual identity in high school. This is a real, tangible piece of cotton, a physical relic that someone's been holding on to for more than 20 years. That's a real connection.
So the Reddit thread didn't just dig up memories. It found an actual artifact. Someone posted a link to an interview with the band from way back in May of 2002, a perfect digital time capsule, basically freezing the band in this one single, really pivotal moment in time.
And this is where we get this really fascinating split between what people thought was happening and what was actually going on. The fans, they remembered this big, energetic 7-piece band. But the interview revealed that at that exact moment, the band was in a total crisis. They just lost 2 key members and had to scrap a whole U.S. tour. So from the outside, they looked like this powerhouse band, but on the inside, they were literally fighting to keep it all together.
The interview also gave us this gem, their own self-made genre, ska, punk, nerd rock. I mean, how cool is that? It just tells you everything about their vibe. They weren't just musicians. They were proud, self-proclaimed nerds, totally into their passions, from computers and video games to the nuts and bolts of music.
But what's really wild is how aware they were of their own timing. The title of their one and only album, Missed This Little Trend, actually came from one of their lyrics. They knew that the big mainstream ska wave of the mid-90s was already over. They felt like they were a little too late to get on MTV. And looking back now, man, that feels so on the nose, almost like a prophecy.
Okay, so to really get the full picture of the Busdrivers, we've got to zoom out a little. You have to understand where they came from. They weren't just some isolated thing. They were part of a legendary local music scene.
See, Gainesville, Florida, back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was an absolute hotbed for ska and punk. People call it a ska mecca, mostly because it gave us one of the absolute giants of the genre, Less Than Jake. So the Busdrivers weren't just in a vacuum, they were growing up in the shadow of these legends.
People on Reddit got so into this, they actually mapped out the whole family tree of the scene. As you can see, the Busdrivers are right there in that first wave, with giants like Less Than Jake. Then came a second wave, and get this, the original poster, the guy who started this whole thing, he's now in a band called Now Leaving Space, trying to kick off a third wave. So you see, it's this whole living, breathing legacy that's still going.
All right, so we've got the memories, we've got the scene, we've even got an interview from back in the day. You'd think the story is complete, right? But then, just when you think it's over, it takes this one last absolutely unbelievable turn. The past decides to speak directly to the present.
And it's the one question that's just kind of hanging over this whole thing, right? What would the actual members of the Busdrivers think if they saw all this? Strangers 2 decades later discussing and debating and cherishing their old band. So check out this timeline. It really puts it in perspective. The band's active from around 2001 to 2003. Then, almost 20 years of just silence. 2 years ago, the question gets posted. The thread starts to grow, collecting all these memories. And then, just 8 months ago,
a ghost shows up in the machine.
And there it is. A user named Natty Life just casually drops this comment into the thread. Turns out it's Min, the guitarist for the Busdrivers, the video game nerd from that 2002 interview. With just one simple, unassuming sentence, he closes a 20-year gap, confirms everything, and brings this whole digital detective story full circle. I mean, you couldn't write a better ending. It's just perfect.
So, why are we talking about this? Why does a long-lost ska band from Florida even matter? Well, because it's this perfect little story about how memory and community actually work now in the digital age. It's like the internet has become our global campfire where we all gather around and share the stories that define these little corners of our culture.
When you really break it down, what's the takeaway here? Well, for one, it's like we're watching digital archaeology happen in real time, a forgotten history being pieced back together, comment by comment. It also shows how these small niche communities online end up being these accidental guardians of culture. And it just proves that even though so much online feels like it disappears in a flash, history isn't really lost. It's just out there, waiting for someone to ask the right question.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Think about the old forums you used to be on, the bands from your hometown that no one talks about anymore, the digital communities you were a part of. What's hiding in your digital attic? What forgotten story, what lost piece of your past is just sitting there, waiting for someone to ask the right question?